What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 32 preview. So I'm going to go through a bunch of questions and topics that you've put to me and give you my opinion. We'll start off with Bukayo Saka. So what do you think about Saka? It seems like in the absence of Saliba and the return of Jesus, it may have had a negative impact on his involvement. I've seen this theory going around. My short answer would be, this might be true, but we absolutely do not have enough games to start drawing these kind of conclusions. If you're not on free hit 32 and you own Saka, there is absolutely no way he is your priority transfer out. There must be other moves you can make that are going to score you more points. If I own Saka, I'm definitely not selling him. If I don't own him and I'm looking to buy an Arsenal midfielder, I still think he's probably top of the list if we think that, you know, he's still nailed on, he's still going to get good minutes, and he's still going to be on penalties. And if you're on free hit 32 like I am, I still think he's one of the first names to put in your squad. So I'm not really massively concerned. And the reason I say we don't have enough games to draw these kind of conclusions is because there's only been 2 games where Saliba's been out and Jesus and Saka have both started. And that is the last 2 games against West Ham and Liverpool. Because if we look at how long Saliba's been out for, it's the last 4 matches, starting with Crystal Palace in Game Week 28. Well, what did Saka do in Game Week 28? He got 2 goals and 1 assist. Now, to be fair, in that same game, Jesus only came off the bench, and when he started against Leeds but went off in the 59th minute, Saka didn't start that game because he was ill. So it's only Liverpool and West Ham, and to be fair, Saka has blanked in both of those games. But if you think about those games, he missed the penalty against West Ham. So if he scores that in the last game week, because I get that people are frustrated that he finished with 0 points, but if he scores that, I really don't think we're having this conversation right now. And you remember in the Liverpool game, okay, he wasn't massively involved, but right at the end, if Martinelli had got that weight of pass just right, he may have scored in that game as well. So I think he came close to scoring in both the Liverpool and the West Ham game. It just so happens that football and FPL happened and he got 0 returns in either of those games as well. And I think it's human nature to look for reasons to explain stuff, right? We should be thinking about these things, but I don't think after 2 games you can now say that Saliba out and Jesus back means Saka's just not going to return. It might be that Martinelli and Odegaard are slightly better going forward because that happened earlier on in the season as well, but I don't think I would start drawing massive conclusions from what we've seen. The other thing I've seen people start saying about Saka is that he looks tired. Now, to be fair, I don't think he had a particularly good game against West Ham. And when you're fighting for the title, and you've never done that before, it can be quite a grueling season. There's lots of pressure. I'm sure it takes a toll mentally as well as physically. But, and I keep going back to this, a lot of people said, right, and I'll just bring up the FPL screen again, a lot of people said after he blanked against Fulham and Bournemouth and got 0 returns that he looked tired. Then all of a sudden he gets 3 returns against Crystal Palace. So I think people are just trying to explain why he's blanked twice and are looking for reasons to do something because maybe they're bored or they just don't fancy him right now and they want to have an excuse to go for someone else. But I just don't think the excuses are really there. So if you are free hitting and you want to go without him, you should absolutely do that. It's a 1 game week only squad. And if it all goes wrong, you'll have Saka back in your team next week probably. But for those of you that aren't free hitting, I can't see any reason to use a transfer to get rid of him before Southampton at home. Let me know below if you think different. All right, lots of people thinking about this. Who's the best third Liverpool asset on free hit 32 to go with Salah and Trent? And I would agree that those 2 are the best options. They're absolutely nailed in my squad. Now, one thing to think about with Liverpool is they're playing this Saturday against Nottingham Forest at 3 o'clock, and then they play again midweek on Wednesday against West Ham away. So if you haven't already realised, Game Week 33 deadline is on Tuesday. It's a midweek fixture for all teams. Now, to be fair, Liverpool have done that weekend, midweek turnaround lots of times because of the Champions League, and they've only played Leeds on Monday and don't have to play Nottingham Forest until Saturday. So you'd imagine all the players that played in that Leeds game will be fit and available for Saturday, and there might not be too much rotation, but because the next game is on Wednesday, and especially with those forward spots, they got so many players that can rotate in. Players like Jota and Gakpo, even if they start again, they might get reduced minutes. They might come off around the 60th, 65th, 70th minute instead of getting to kind of 80 to 90. So that's maybe something worth considering. In terms of the defenders, over the next kind of 4 to 5 matches, I would expect Robertson to get more minutes than any of the attackers that aren't named Salah. But obviously they still have Tsimikas that could play instead. I think the only good thing for Robertson is in the last 2 matches, Trent has played that inverted role where he's come off the right back spot and played in midfield. So Robertson then plays more of a left centre-back. They have that back 3, Robertson, Van Dijk and Konate. And I'm just not sure Klopp is going to trust Tsimikas to play that same role. So I think while they've had a Monday to Saturday turnaround between Leeds and Forest, I'm pretty sure Robertson's going to start again. But if you want to go absolutely safe and you don't want to pick an attacker, then you've probably got to go for Van Dijk instead. The other thing to say is if Robertson is going to play left centre-back, that probably impacts his ability to get forward and get attacking returns. Now, a bit like with the Saka conversation, we haven't seen enough games to see exactly how it's going to impact Robertson. But against Leeds, he did get forward at times, but I don't really remember him creating a whole lot. So although he looks pretty nailed, if that's the position he's going to play, I almost feel like Van Dijk and possibly getting some headers from set pieces might be the way to go. In terms of the attackers, right, I think there's every case, and there's a theory going around in the community, it's just going to be Jota, Gakpo and Salah again. I do think that is probably true, but I think Gakpo seems to have that number 9 spot nailed down. So I'd be much more confident going with him instead of Jota. I feel like the only player that's going to come in and play that role from the beginning is Firmino, and he's obviously leaving at the end of the season. So when we get closer to the end, and maybe top 4 is gone or something like that, or it's the last home game, I'm sure Firmino is going to get a start, because obviously he's still a really good player. But I feel like Gakpo is probably more nailed than someone like Jota. Now, some people have turned around and say, well, hang on a second, Jota's started the last 4 games. So minutes-wise, he's actually better than Gakpo and Darwin over the last 4 fixtures. But I think there's a little bit of context needed that every game Jota has started, so Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal and Leeds, has been on the wing, mostly left wing. But in the Chelsea game, where he played 90 minutes, he started on the right, because Salah didn't start. Now, going forward, that probably isn't going to happen too often. Salah is pretty much going to start every single game. And so if Jota's not being used as a centre-forward because Gakpo's there, it's left wing. And you've also got Darwin Núñez who can play in that position as well. So if you're asking me right now, do I think Jota, Gakpo and Salah are going to start? Yes. If you're asking me which one I think is at most risk of being rotated, I think it probably is Jota, because Darwin could start instead. So if I'm going for an attacker that's not named Salah, I think I would go for Gakpo. But again, I cannot sit here and tell you that's completely risk-free, because against Chelsea, he missed out. So he started 6 of the last 7. So his minutes look good, but absolutely not nailed on. Now, people might say there's more upside going for an attacker against Forest instead of a defender, and I would probably agree with that, but that's not the whole conversation, right? If we're looking at the players you can choose from, it's Robertson or Van Dijk with not a guaranteed clean sheet, but a very good chance. When you look at the clean sheet odds, they're right up there. Nottingham Forest do not score a huge amount of goals, plus an attacker. So it could be like a Maddison, Eze, Son, I don't know, Martinelli, Odegaard, someone like that, plus Robertson, or Gakpo plus a defender. And when you start taking out Liverpool and Arsenal defenders, it gets a bit tougher to choose them. So I really like Gakpo as an option. He is my preferred choice above Jota for all the reasons I've mentioned. But I don't think it's as easy as saying he's just better than Robertson. It's those combinations you've got to look at. But either way, I think there's probably going to be earlier subs than we saw against Leeds because of that game against West Ham on Wednesday. So hopefully that's helped. That's kind of my thinking about Liverpool players. I don't think it's obvious. I don't think there is an obvious third choice. It depends on what your risk appetite is and who you prefer in those combinations of players. So right now, in my squad, I've got Gakpo, but I really don't like the defence. I think there's every chance that I'll probably change it. All right, with so many good midfield and forward options on free hit, I'm struggling to pick between 3-4-3 and 3-5-2, which is better. Now, what I'll say is don't get hung up on what the formation is. Think about the specific players instead. And I know it sounds obvious, but you should be picking the players that you think are going to score the most points, no matter what the formation ends up being, or you should be picking the players that you're kind of happiest with. So take this as an example, right? Let's say I'm set up in a 3-5-2, so I'm going to play all of Saka, Martinelli, Salah, Maddison and Gakpo. I'm also going to start Jesus and Watkins, and Solanke's on my bench. So that 3-5-2 looks pretty good. There's nothing really wrong with it unless you absolutely hate Maddison, which is fair enough. But because I've got 2.6 million in the bank, instead of Maddison, I can afford Harry Kane, which would then be playing a 3-4-3. So forget the formation. Who do you prefer this week, Maddison or Kane? If the answer is Kane, then 3-4-3 is what you should be playing. So I would switch Maddison down to Andreas. He would then become my bench player instead of Solanke. And then I'd have the money to go from Solanke all the way to Harry Kane. So all of a sudden, I'm playing Kane, Watkins, Jesus, Gakpo, benching Andreas, Salah, Martinelli, Saka. So it's not really about the formation, it's about the specific players. And I know this is easier to say than do because I'm struggling with it myself. But the best way to build a free hit is to put in all the players that no matter what, apart from an injury, you're going to go with. So for me, I'm probably going to go for Johnston, Trent, Salah, probably going to have Watkins, Saka as well. So those kind of 5 to 7 players, they're in no matter what. You're only building around them, and then it's just about comparing those different players. So look at all the midfielders you want to choose from, look at all the forwards, who are your top options? That will then pick your formation. The one thing I would say, just specifically on forwards versus midfielders, for the most part, it feels like a lot of the forwards are kind of, I don't want to say sure things because there's no guarantee of points in FPL, but there's a lot of players you could pick in the forward line that are kind of nailed on, are going to get good minutes, and they take penalties, like Kane, Watkins, Tony, and Solanke. That might seem very boring to a lot of people, fair enough, but they're kind of all-round great picks. They're the kind of players you'd want in your team normally. A lot of the midfield picks, outside of like Arsenal and Salah, they feel a bit more punty, right? So you've got Maddison, who's not in great form right now. Eze, who's been obviously great very recently, 2 goals against Southampton, but not necessarily over the season. Andreas, who, is playing a very weak Leeds team right now, probably on penalties without Mitrovic as well. You've got someone like Gakpo, who we're not quite sure if he's 100% going to start and what his minutes will be like. So I feel like the midfielders are where the kind of punts are, and the forward line are where the kind of more safe picks are. And maybe you could choose from that point of view where you want to do something a bit different. So you go for 3-5-2 versus going a little bit safer and going 3-4-3. So you can see in my team right now, if I just go back to here, I'm actually in a 3-4-3 where Ben Rama's on my bench, and I've got Tony nailed on penalties, Watkins nailed on penalties, and Jesus, who presumably will start. We'll have to wait and see on Friday, but he could easily become Kane or Solanke instead. And then my kind of one midfield punt, because Salah, Martinelli and Saka are definitely not punts, is Gakpo. And although lots of people are going to talk about Gakpo now, and you're going to see him in a lot of free hit teams, compared to the average ownership and non-free hitters, he's still going to be somewhat of a differential. So I could go 3-5-2 if I want a bit more, I don't want to say risk, but if I want to go a little bit more different. But I just feel like there's so many good forward picks, I'm probably going to end up on 3-4-3 myself. But there's a long time between now and Friday's deadline. A lot can change. Alright, so should we be betting against Kane and or Trippier with picks like Alex Moreno and Jesus respectively? The upside is higher should Trippier and Kane blank. The obvious counterpoint is if they don't both blank and they both get a decent score, suddenly that upside isn't quite so high. But I understand how people are going to be thinking about it this week, that it's unlikely they can both get a score that punishes you. Because if Kane gets 1 or 2 goals, it means Trippier's probably lost the clean sheet, and therefore he would need multiple attacking returns to start to worry you. And likewise, if Trippier's got a 9 or a 12 pointer, it probably means he's got the clean sheet and therefore Harry Kane has blanked. But of course, there are scenarios where they can both do well. Trippier, clean sheet intact, couple of bonus points, goes off after 70 minutes with a slight knock. He's going to be fine for the next game, but can't make it through the rest of the Spurs game. Then Harry Kane scores 1 or 2 goals. They both get a good score, and maybe the players you went with instead do worse. So there are scenarios where that can happen, even though that looks unlikely. So let's run through each different one. So the way people think about it when they build their free hit, which we all do naturally, is that I'm going to pick 11 players and the hope is they're all going to return. Even though the reality is that very rarely happens. If you go back and look over the last 31 game weeks, most of you will struggle to find one game week where every single player returned. So ultimately, you should be picking the best 11 to fit the positions they fill. So let's say you've got enough money for any scenario. If Kane, in your eyes, is one of the 7 best attackers this week, so either in a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, then he should be in your free hit squad. Likewise, if you're then looking at your defence, and you've got 1 or 2 Liverpool and Arsenal defenders, and you can't fill any more spots from those teams because they're being used in attack, then is Trippier the next best defender to go for? If the answer is yes, you think he's better than the Crystal Palace, Leicester defenders, etc., then that is who you should go for, even if you picked Harry Kane instead, because obviously there are scenarios where Kane scores and Trippier gets an assist, and he outscores those other defenders that don't end up keeping a clean sheet. The next option is to back against one of them and try and make the correct call. So you either back the Trippier clean sheet and go without Kane, or you back Harry Kane and you ignore Trippier and go for a different defender. The problem that could happen is Kane scores, Trippier gets an assist and loses the clean sheet, but those 5 points are still more than a defender that you would have picked instead that doesn't get a clean sheet or an attack and return and just finishes on 1 or 2 points. So that's how I've gone through the process. Do I really want Kane and Trippier? Probably not, especially when everyone not free hitting is going to have them. But what if I pick the wrong one? So then the next way of thinking is, well, I'll just go without both of them. But obviously that could put you in real trouble if the players you pick are just not quite as good. So that's the kind of things you've got to think about. Ultimately, if you think it's genuinely close between two players and you're the kind of manager that wants to do things a little bit different, which is absolutely fair enough, especially on a free hit, then pick the different player. If you're looking between Kane and Maddison or Kane and Tony, Kane and Watkins, and you think everyone's going to own Kane, I'm just going to back Trippier to get a clean sheet, then go for the other forward instead. Likewise in defence, if you really think Harry Kane is going to score, go for a different defender and just hope for the best. I do think it's unlikely you're going to be heavily punished because, like I said, Kane gets a big score, Trippier probably hasn't. But it is possible, right? So if you genuinely think they are by far one of the best defenders you can pick this week and one of the best attackers, you should still have them in your team and just hope that overall that is worth more points than who you would put in instead. So can I sit here and say that Alex Moreno is definitely a better option than Trippier? I would say absolutely not. Very attacking, and Villa have done well defensively recently, but away from home I'm expecting them to concede against Brentford. So then you're relying on an attack and return, and why can't Trippier get you that attack and return instead? Also playing a better defence where they may get a clean sheet at home against Spurs. Jesus, I think, is a lot closer with Kane. And if it's between the two, then yeah, maybe I would go different with Jesus instead. But he's probably not on penalties, and his minutes aren't guaranteed either, whereas they are with Harry Kane. So I'm not really looking to kind of give you an answer either way. I'm just trying to give you things to think about, because the more fun pick and the easy pick for me to say, because it's a bit different and that's what people like, is Jesus. But do I 100% think that Jesus is going to outscore Kane this week? I don't know if I'm that confident about it. So the upside sounds pretty good, and I probably think I will go with just one or neither of these two players. But of course, if it backfires, suddenly you've got, would it be high downside or would it be low downside? Either way, you haven't got a high upside, right? So just think about it like that. And if you think it's close, then you either go with the effective ownership and just play it safe, especially if you've got a really good rank, or you go a little bit different and try and get up that rank, overall rank instead. You can just play it whichever way you want to play it. Either way, let me know down in the comments below. Are you going for both or one? If so, who? Or are you just going to go with neither? I think I'm probably going to go with one, and I suspect it will be Trippier. I just want to quickly go through some of the common questions with free hits. So you will always have one transfer the game week after free hitting. So everyone that free hits in game week 32 will have one transfer in game week 33. It doesn't matter if you rolled one in game week 31. Everyone will only have one in game week 33. So if you are someone that is free hitting in game week 34, make sure you use your transfer in 33, because you'll only have one in game week 35. If you make transfers and then free hit, those transfers will not carry into next week. So some people think they can make a transfer this week that they want to do for 33, then they can free hit and that transfer will carry through. It won't. If you free hit in game week 32, your team in game week 33 will be the same one as you ended game week 31 with. You cannot make transfers, because as soon as you free hit, those transfers then count towards your free hit instead. You always get the team the next week back that you had the previous week, if that makes sense. And you can make unlimited transfers until deadline. It's just like a wild card in that respect, apart from you don't get to keep the team for the following week. So don't worry, I haven't forgotten that not everybody is on a free hit, but most of the questions that came in were free hit specifically, but this one's not. Who are the must-have players if you're not on a free hit? And I would say the key players to look at are Liverpool players, primarily Salah and Trent, camp, because I think in terms of minutes and attacking potential, they probably are the two best options. They got Nottingham Forest at home this week. Now, to be fair, Arsenal also have a good a good fixture this week with Southampton at home, and their players tend to be a little bit cheaper. But in game week 33, they run into Man City away, which is very difficult. Then in game week 34, it's a single game week of Chelsea at home. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a really difficult fixture given how Chelsea have played recently. But for Liverpool, it's Forest at home, West Ham away, which is better than Man City away. Then it's a double in 34 of Spurs at home and Fulham at home. And after that, if you did kind of get stuck with these players, it's, I'm just checking here, Brentford at home, Leicester away, Villa at home, and Southampton away. Now, you might look at that and think, well, Brentford, Leicester, Villa, tough to get a clean sheet. But I think with Trent's attacking potential and the fact that Brentford and Villa are both at home, that still makes him a really good option to bring in. If you do get stuck with Salah, that is not a problem with the fixtures they've got. The one thing I've got my eye on with Salah is possibly in game week 37 switching him to a Man City midfielder, because they'll likely double that week, and then maybe bringing him back in for the final game. But that's a long way away. We'll worry about it then. But for now, they're probably the two main players, or the team that I would look at. You could look at Arsenal as well, because their players are still very good value, but the fixtures in the very short term aren't great after Southampton. Otherwise, maybe someone like Ollie Watkins if you need a new forward, possibly Moreno as well. I know a lot of people like him, but I just think the fixtures they've got coming from now until the end of the season include Brentford away, Man United away, Spurs at home, Liverpool away, and Brighton at home. I think 5 of the last 7 are quite difficult for Villa to get a clean sheet. And so he is very attacking and cheap, but I'm not sure I'll be looking to bring him in. And then you've got Crystal Palace players, and I know people think I'm really down on them. Look, they've got great fixtures. They're a good price, especially Eze and Elise. But from 33 onwards, I don't think they're the best way to fill your midfield. So I wouldn't go out of my way to bring them in. Key players, if you're not free hitting, have got to be Liverpool ones for me. I'll leave that video there. There'll be team selection tomorrow. I will try and fit in a final thoughts video on Friday as well, because it's a Friday deadline. That's going to be a bit more difficult. So we'll see how that goes. If you enjoyed this one, give it a like, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you again soon.